Okay, so welcome to Breaking Your Patterns. I am excited to do this one. I've done a lot of workshops about breaking your relationship patterns, and people are like, well, what happens if it's not a relationship? And I'm like, well, that's true. And what I realized is I actually wrote a book about this called Inviting Shift. As I was writing this out, like, how do I break patterns and how do we break our own patterns, and recognize them is the one thing. When you're in a relationship, the other people will tell you what your patterns are. But when you're by yourself and looking at your own patterns, how do you recognize those and then break those? And as I was going through it, it really follows Inviting Shift. But I want to go through this anyway because I think it's really something that we don't always want to look at. Often patterns are those things that we're like, well, I can't help it. I'm just like that, right? So if you're here live, feel free to put in where you're from. I think a lot of people might know each other, but probably not everybody knows each other. So feel free to put in where you're from, get to know each other. I'm going to be done before 8 o'clock by whether or not I'm done by 8 o'clock, hopefully. And then if you have questions, just feel free to put them in the chat. I'll try to address them as it makes sense, and if not, I might hold them off till the end, but they will all get answered, I promise. And then I like to do a little grounding or a little reading. It's been a very long day for me, so before I get focused on something, sometimes it helps. And as I was thumbing through, I don't know if you can see this from the background, as I was thumbing through the Book of Awakening, there was actually one that's called Breaking Patterns. So I thought, well, how appropriate for us. So I thought I might read this really quick. So it starts with a quote from Walt Whitman that says, if I contradict myself, I contradict myself. I contain multitudes. And then the passage says, we create patterns that others depend on. And then the last thing we ever imagined happens. We grow and change. And then to stay vital, we must break the patterns we created. There is no blame or fault in this. It is commonplace in nature. Watch the ocean and shore do their dance of build up and crumble, and you'll see this happen daily. We know we are close to this threshold when we hear someone say, you're not yourself, or that was out of character for you. What is difficult at this juncture is to resist either complying with how others see us or withholding who we really are. The challenge, which I don't do well, but stay committed to, is to say to those we love, I am more than I have shown you, and more than you are willing to see. Let's work our love and know each other more fully. So if you have the book, that was actually May 20th's reading. But Mark Nepo is really great. And I love what he says there about this is not failure. Like, wanting to change your patterns is not failure. These patterns that we had, they may have been really serving us for some time. Whatever patterns we've had, maybe they worked when we were younger. I had a pattern of like rage. And when I was young, it's what kept me safe. My rage kept me safe, put up a big wall between me and other people. And it's the only way I knew, because I felt really unsafe. And I was as a child. As I got older, obviously, and wanting to be in connection with other people, rage is not necessarily the quality people are looking for in a friend. So I had to look at those patterns, like what enraged me? When was I getting enraged? Why was I enraged? How was I feeling before the thing that triggered me? Was I already in a bad situation? I had to look at all of those patterns. So that's what this is about. A little about who I am. I teach the Desire Map classes, as well as the Fire Starter classes. And I have a new program coming out about activating our own personal power, because I think that there's a real lack in Like, where do we get our power from? What does this power mean? And where do we get it from? And how does it look in the different areas of our life? So I'm really focused on power, basically, how we empower ourselves. So, talking about patterns today, though, and patterns are a huge way we have access to power. Usually, patterns that we don't like or feel icky are where our power is getting like sucked out of us, because we're feeding something that feels terrible to us. So, when you wanted to change patterns in the past, I would love to hear in the comments. Yeah, I will. Thank you. I would love to hear in the comments, how did your parents get you to change your patterns? Or how did they try to get you to, if you were doing something that they didn't deem was appropriate or what you should be doing, how did they do it? Do you know? Do you recall? What was their method? If you could put that in the chat. And while you're thinking about that and answering that, I got a question about, can you define power versus empower? That's a really good question. So to me, I have a pet peeve around the word empower and how people use it. Empower with the EM. It triggers me when somebody's like, I empower other people to blah. No, you don't. So empower is to give someone permission to their own power, which we can't. I mean, maybe for our children, we can do that, right? We can restrict them, right? So there is certain power that we can give to our children. But outside of that, we empower ourselves. There's no other way to do it. There's plenty of therapists out there that can tell you how many clients they've had that you just didn't want their power back. So you can take them to the water, but you can't, like, drown them in it just to get them to drink. So empowerment means looking at ways, to me, it means looking at ways in which I can retrieve my power. And the power is what I'm trying to get. So I guess to me, empower is more of a verb and power is the noun. And I don't know I don't have a right answer for that, but I hope that works. And if you have something more defined that you want to ask, just let me know. Okay, so bribery or guilt. Yeah. So there's 3 emotions that we use in order to change patterns, right? So one that I was very familiar with, because I grew up in a Catholic house, Catholic sometimes house, was shame. Oh, God's gonna, see what you're doing. Oh, you're a bad girl. You're going to the bad place. All that shame, right? So that's one way that we do it. Or we shame people like, oh, what are people going to think about if you do something like that, right? That shame piece. Another way that we do it is fear through punishment, right? So yeah, if you do that, maybe I'm not going to violently hurt you or like physically hurt you, but there might be a fear of, taking your phone away or whatever it is that we had as kids. Mine was like a 5-minute phone call, and God forbid I got in trouble. There was no 5-minute phone calls. That was a long time ago. And then the last one that we usually use is reward, right? So if you do this, reward. Here you go. Joy. So we use joy as a way to change too, which is okay. Oh, threats and punishment, ignoring, yeah. Not what I was doing. So yeah. I've talked to you before. Your parents had a really good emotional intelligence about them. I think one person said that they had discussions about what they were doing and why, and yeah, that's a great way to do it. Is no like change of emotion, because that's what we're doing. Is we're saying that this emotion is more important than whatever it is that you were doing. So, how have you tried changing habits in today, like the last 5 or 10 years? Have you tried changing anything, any patterns in your life? And how do you do it? So for me, one of the ways I will do that is I truly use the reward system. Maybe a little too much. Sometimes I'm using the wrong rewards, and it's more indulgence. Oh, and someone had essays they had to write. Oh, that's good punishment to like really think about it. It's almost like journaling it. I mean, what a great habit to kind of put you into. Yeah, awesome. So how about today? How do you try to change habits today? I have had a lot of bad habits in my life that I've had to let go of, and then good habits that I need to take into for my health. And I'm like the runner out of the gate. Oh, it's perfect the first like week of my resolutions. Like everything's beautiful. I'm even charting it, and it's all marked off. Second week, it goes down the tubes. So sometimes we do cold turkey. Sometimes we do dieting, right? Or we do especially like the crash dieting where we're just like, whoops, gonna stop everything and just completely change my diet. Some people ease into it, you know, like for example, when quitting smoking, some people will cut down their cigarettes until they have like no cigarettes left and then go, you know, without cigarettes. Some people will go from the 2 packs a day to nothing, right? And then there's some people who might try a million different ways to quit smoking. They're the ones who need like the list of 100 that options of things that they can do. And so there's different ways that okay, there's apps. Yeah, I like that one too. So one person said, I try not to say names because we don't know who's watching this, but one person said that they change a habit for 30 days, then give permission to give up after that. I love that. I always need a limit amount of time. Let's just see how this goes. Let's not, if I don't commit to forever, it makes it a little easier. Sheer willpower only works for a short period of time. Yeah. Yeah, that's familiar to me too. I know all of those. And because, so, and here's the thing, like often the ways that we try to change things today may be linked to the ways that our parents tried to change us when we were younger. So for me, I can still feel myself trying to shame myself like into doing things that are good for me. It's something I've worked really long and hard on, like being like, nope, not listening to that. And it's still like the voices still pop up in my head. Yeah. So this workshop is not about shame. We're not going to talk about shame because, well, we're not going to use shame as a instigator because that's usually the main saboteur. When we're shaming ourselves at some point, our inner self goes, yep, you're right. I am a piece of whatever and I'm just giving up. That's all. I can't do it, right? That's when we get to that, I can't do it. This is just who I am. So right now, just think about something you might want to be changing in your life, something that maybe you can control, like not the coronavirus, but maybe your reaction to it, or, you know, whatever else it is that's in your life right now, some kind of pattern that you're aware of, or a pattern, a bad habit, and then just hang on to that, just one for now. I don't want them all flooding you, and that's why I'm asking you just to come up with one so that you can stay focused on that one instead of trying, because I go through something and I try to apply it to all areas of my life while I'm going through it, but if we stay focused on one, that's better. So okay, so we'll come back to that thing, but so let's just talk about recognizing patterns and what patterns are. So for me, patterns are triggers that keep coming back. And for me, often I've learned to feel those triggers through my feelings. If something feels icky and I'm having that thought in my head, why does this always happen to me? Or why does this never work out? This is a pattern, right? So it could be like a crippling fear of something that you have, abandonment, illness, these core wounds that we have that are coming up in different ways. Eating often is a pattern for us, whether we overeat or undereat or worry about dieting and gaining weight. Those are usually cyclical. Issues with friends, if you have the same relationship kind of problems, whether that's friends, family, spouses, same type of boyfriend with a different face. I dated a lot of the same guy with a lot of this different faces until I realized that it was the person I was attracting, right? The person that could handle me at that time was a person I did not want to be with. So it was really about me learning to break that cycle by changing some things about myself so that I could be in relationship with the type of people I wanted to be in with. Addictions, recoveries, relapses, and that's not just drugs and alcohol. That could be food, that could be sleeping addictions, sex addictions, anything that we do beyond a healthy measure. Procrastination, disorganization. Patterns are often destructive, and they're attention-seeking behavior. Yeah, so basically any unwanted situation that just keeps coming around. So like I said, I recognize mine because I have emotional triggers, and I start getting that emotional deja vu. I don't know if y'all know what that feels like, but that whole like, hold on, I've been here before, I felt this before, something's not right. And then in my past, the questions were, why is this always happening to me? Why do I always do this? Why do I do this stupid thing all the time? And so once we recognize that pattern, the important thing is to stop and feel, or if we're just recognizing the consequences. So for instance, when I was in my ragey, I realized that people didn't really want to be around me, you know? People avoided my phone calls if I was ragey with them, right? So that's the pattern I started seeing, was that nobody wanted to be around me. And I had to start looking at, well, why don't people want to be around me? It's because you're a raging bitch. I mean, that's what it was. And so I had to start recognizing those moments, right? And what happened was I would recognize it at first, hours later. Oh, I did that thing again where I got all ragey. Oh, so annoying. And then it would be like a few minutes after. And then it would be in the middle of the rage that I would recognize it. And then I would get to the point where I would feel it in my body happening before I actually got to that point. And I'd be like, hold on. That's where I got to stop it. So the great thing about patterns is they're cyclical and they come around. I mean, it's one of the awful things about them. But the great thing is we get that chance over and over and over again to see it and then feel it and then stop it as close to possible as we can before we do that action or behavior that we don't want to do, or we don't do the action or behavior that we do want to do, either way. So it's really about stopping and feeling, what is that like? Instead of ignoring it, because that's where shame comes in. If we try to shame ourselves out of a pattern, we'll just ignore that pattern as long as we possibly can until it has to tear us apart. But if we can actually stop and feel it first, we don't have to get to that point, right? So get comfortable with the emotion and become that observer. We all know what an observer is, I hope. So we want to be looking at what's going on like it's a show, like it's a TV show, what's happening, you know, like you can still kind of feel what's going on. You have compassion for the characters. And it's, you know, you can see the bigger picture, not just this emotion that you're having. So become that observer of your patterns. What's going on? Just get curious about it. Pretend you can't fix it, right? Just get curious about it. What is this feeling and this deja vu trying to tell you? So So I often talk about survival. Some of you get sick of hearing this. Survival and thriving. So surviving to me is running away from something that we don't like, that scares us, that's, you know, uncomfortable. And thriving in life is looking towards something that you're like, ooh, I really want that, and running towards it. Two completely different things. And so we have to know what we want, right? We can't just say, hey, here's this ugly pattern that I don't like that I do. Because what happens is we take that pattern out, but we need something to fill that space, because now there's a space where that pattern, those habits used to be, that thinking used to be. There needs to be new truth and new actions that are happening to support that new truth. And often we don't know what we want. That's very familiar. I don't know if any of you all feel that way, but often I didn't know what I wanted. I sure as hell knew what I didn't want. But I didn't know what it would look like. I wasn't taught to dream when I was little, so I didn't know how to envision a, you know, a dream. And I was reading Glennon Doyle's Untamed. I don't know if any of you have been reading this. Phenomenal. And she talks about this question: if you can't figure out what it is that you do want, ask yourself, what's the truest and most beautiful version of the situation? The truest and the most beautiful vision for this situation. And that will get you closer to what it is that you actually want. So some people do this in vision boarding, right? They use their vision, they put all these things that they want on a board, all the things that they envision for their life. And it works for a lot of people, you know, it helps them. It's very masculine. The things, go get the things, you know. It's a very masculine way, which works for a lot of people. I'm not knocking it. For me, I always had a hard time because I never valued materialistic things. And yeah, I could put like the happy family on there and stuff. But what I found was the desire map, which some of you are going through. And that helped me figure out how I wanted to feel underneath all of that stuff, right? Like once I got all of that stuff, I could figure out how I wanted to feel, right? If I was going to get that stuff, how did I think that stuff was going to make me feel? Because that's why I was going after it. That's why we always go after anything. We go after things because we have feelings behind them. There's desire or cravings. We just have to figure out what those feelings are. And so that's how I figure out what it is that I want, by those feelings. Like I know what core desired feelings I want to feel, and all of my decisions go by that. If they don't make me feel those three ways, I don't do the thing. Like it's a no. That's the end of it. And that keeps me from doing all the things that I should do, which is where a lot of our patterns come. Because if they're uncomfortable to us now, they may not have been uncomfortable to us before. Like I said, they may have served us. But if they're uncomfortable to us now, they're not in alignment with what we want. There's something in them that's not working for us. Our intuition is not working for us, or is not agreeing with what's going on. There's something happening. Feelings are not always right. I want to clarify, right? Because sometimes we have core wounds and we get easily triggered by other things or whatever. Like, I mean, they are always there. They're always valid. They're just not always our truth. Truth and feelings are two different things. I can know it's true and feel like that's not the truth. And Danielle Laporte says something like, desire is the closest truth you can know about a person or yourself. So if I know what you desire, I probably know more truth about you than any story you can tell me. Yeah, so when we know how we want to feel, we can easily align with that. And so breaking the cycle. So the cycle looks something like this. I have 100 books next to me, and of course I almost forgot to bring the book that I was going to talk about. So this is Inviting Shift. Oh, you can't see it because of my background. And there's five, this is something I came up with through all of my learning, is there's five, I have an acronym as SHIFT for the cycle of shift. So the first part is something ain't right. So when we start getting that feeling, right, where we're not feeling great within ourselves, and we might know what it is, you know, something sudden might have happened, like, or Corona happened, or like we know it's the coronavirus, that maybe that's our something isn't right. And sometimes we don't know what that is. You know, something just feels icky or blah. I felt like I was living like in a black and white movie for a long time, didn't know how to put that in a feeling, but something wasn't right. Um, and then in this stage, we really get still, just like I was saying before, we get still and start feeling it out. Oh, that's interesting. And without going down the rabbit hole of like telling ourselves all kinds of crazy stories about the fact that we're uncomfortable, because we will do that. Um, Instead of going down that discomfort, just observing it, you know, and being curious about it. I wonder why I'm feeling so meh today. That's my word when I'm feeling black and white, meh. Um, and then the second stage is honing in and honoring. So honoring to me is this part that Danielle Laporte calls, she has a quote that says, radical transformation starts with radical acceptance of what is. Honoring, it just is what it is right now. If we can be still with it, if we can not judge it, let's say, in a harsh way, just that it's currently here, part of my situation, even if that's one of my patterns, right? I currently don't exercise every day. I currently eat garbage every day. I currently keep flirting with guys online that I know are not going to be appropriate for me. All of those things. So we just want to honor, hey, yeah, I'm doing behaviors I am not appreciating right now. This thing is constantly happening. So how can we honor that piece, right? And just be like, oh, this is where it is. So that we have that jumping off point to hone in and go, okay, well, if this is what it is, I'm just curious why. Why is it like this? You know, what's this message telling me? Why is it that I want to do it this way, even though I know it's not healthy for me? And then the third one is the I got it, or the aha moment that everybody loves. They we get them on the weekends, right? This is my favorite part, is that we go to a weekend or we do whatever, and we get this great aha, and we're like, yeah, I got it. And that's great. That's really important. It could be an aha about the situation. It could be an aha about your responsibility or your part in the cycle. It could be an aha about how you move forward. It could be an aha about your perspective or judgments that you're going to open up and, you know, let them widen so that you can see more ways of thinking about something. But whatever it is, it's not over yet. And this is where a lot of people think it's over. They're like, oh, I got the magic. And they just walk away and they're like, it's okay, I'm magical now. But the hard part actually comes after the aha. Like, it feels hard before because you're in the discomfort of the physical feeling and the emotional feeling of it. However, after your aha, a lot of the fortitude comes, right? And in order to keep all of that, the universe comes and says, oh, you want to shift this thing? Let me throw some challenges your way so that we can be sure you actually want to shift this thing. And the more you want to shift it, guess what? The more challenges are going to come. And so the F is fortitude or failure. I don't know. I don't think I called it failure, but I couldn't think of what it was today. Fortitude or fear. So let's go with fortitude or fear. So this is the challenges part. This is where we either cave to fear or we constantly are sitting there trying to get, you know, like my rage, trying to get closer and closer to that spot where I can make the change, where I can break that cycle before it starts. And the more we do that, the easier it becomes. It's just, again, it's like quitting smoking. At first, it's really, really hard. But once you have enough truth behind you, enough days where you haven't smoked, you can say, well, this is getting a little bit easier because I have all of these days and all of these experiences to prove to me that I don't really need that. I can live without it. And then when we get to that part, that's the T for transformations. That's when we've actually transformed at least a little bit of ourselves. And of course, within us, we have a million cycles happening, and we're on different parts of all of those cycles as we process all of the things that we're trying to shift and just adapt to what's going on in the world. And I mean, that's a lot of energy. So just keep that in mind, that if you are trying to break patterns or shift things right now, I see a lot of things on TV and on the Facebook that are like, oh, go do all the things and change your life right now, this is the way. If that's how you feel, fantastic. If that's not how you feel, I want you to know that all that stuff that's going on right now is really impacting our whole cycle, our bodies, our emotional, whether or not you're watching the news or whatever. There's a vibration in the air. So just have some patience and love for yourself. And so that actually brings me to acceptance, is where I wanted to start, because this is the problem. This is the place where people have the hardest part, I think. Well, maybe the second hardest part. This radical acceptance, right? When we deny the situation that we're in, we're denying the truth. And when we resist, right? So Eckhart Tolle would say, whatever we resist persists. So if we are constantly just resisting looking at it, and we just want to get to that dream, that's going to be really hard. Trying to come up with a really good example. I haven't for this one yet. But yeah, so when we deny the situation as what it is, so imagine I'm a woman who feels like my kids are taking advantage of me, right? And I don't want to accept the fact that I have to let them be on their own and take care of themselves and do all of that, right? I feel like I have to be a martyr. Like I have to send them money or take care of them all the time. This is not true for me. I don't have kids that old yet. But like we do all these things because we don't accept where we are. And by, accepting our truth, look, I don't want to send any more money. This child is 30 years old, should be able to take care of himself, or doesn't do what he needs to do to take care of himself. Then if I can't accept that I am part of the problem, then I can't change anything. Breaking patterns, even in relationships, isn't about changing the other person. It isn't about changing the things around us necessarily. It's about changing the way that we think about them. Does that make sense? We might be changing physical things, but the bigger change is the way that we actually think about them and the perspective that we have around them. And acceptance that sometimes the right thing and the hard thing are the same thing. Oh, I hate that too. I really hate when that happens, and it also often happens. So sometimes I hear this all the time in circles when women are like, I just don't have any choices. And the truth is, you just don't have any choices you like. There's a big difference between not having any choices and not having, the gift wrap box that you wanted to come to you. So we have to make sure that we're doing that. And then the last thing I just want to talk about is this really essential piece about sitting in discomfort. This has really come up for me a lot lately as I hear something. So, and then this morning I heard this great, does anybody listen to Glennon Doyle's Instagram? She does a daily, she's freaking fantastic. So if you've heard this, I'm sorry, but she told this really fantastic story this morning about discomfort and about how essential it is as human beings that we experience discomfort. We try so hard, and I believe that, when we say that millennials are entitled or whatever generation is entitled, I don't think it's entitled. I think it's often we've tried to make them so freaking comfortable that they don't know that it's okay not to be comfortable. Like, I don't think it's an entitlement. I think it's like they just don't know. They kind of look at the world and go, well, if I can do everything I need to be comfortable, why would I go any further? Like, I mean, isn't that the point of life, is to be comfortable? And I would challenge that maybe it's not. And so Glennon told this story this morning that she was speaking at a PTA meeting and about helicopter momming, and about how sometimes we have to let them go, you know, and make their own mistakes and stuff. And this woman stood up and she's like, but isn't it my job to make sure that they have everything that they need and that they're happy and taken care of? And Glennon asked, well, you know, your son, what kind of man do you want him to grow up to be? And she said, I want him to be wise and courageous and kind. And Glennon said, well, you don't get those qualities without being uncomfortable. They come from overcoming things. They come from being challenged by things. You can't have wisdom or courage or kindness. I mean, I guess some babies might be naturally born with these, but a lot of times these are qualities that are hard earned by, you know, going through uncomfortable things, being able to have compassion for other people's experiences because you understand hard things. And these are essential to quality characteristics in us. And so I think that's the piece that we're really missing, is this ability to sit in the discomfort. Happiness is like one little sliver of our entire emotional expansion. And so to say that this is the only acceptable slice of our emotional being means that we're cutting off so much more. The lawnmower parent, yeah, exactly. They're mowing down the obstacles before their kids can get to them. Yeah, and that's not helpful. I mean, it seems helpful, and it seems, but it's, you know, somebody asked the power versus empower. This is like enabling versus empowering. You know, like enabling is not helping our children be on their own, take care of themselves. You know, get through those, you know, get through getting your first job or whatever it is that you need to get through. Those are all things that take courage, that take, you know, stepping outside of something that you know. And so if your kids are always comfortable, stepping outside of that comfortability is going to be very challenging for them. And discomfort, you know, is a message for growth. When we have discomfort, it's a message that's telling us something doesn't feel right to us. And now in our masculine patriarchal world, we've learned that feelings don't matter, and that, you know, no, logic is more important than how you're feeling. And I like to believe that we're coming to a more feminine, we're bringing more femininity into the world, where our feelings really are important and that they are really telling us something about who we are. And I love that quote that says, I'm sure Judy can quote me on it. The risk to bloom, when, you know, when we're so tightly bound in there and it becomes so painful that we have to open. And I don't know what the actual quote is, but where we just have to pop open because it's so painful. And that happens at different levels for different people, right? Depending on what we see as comfortable or acceptable. Rock bottom, even, you know, for addicts, rock bottom is different for every person. Some people that's sleeping on the street, some people that's, you know, just getting an eviction notice, or, you know, or just losing their job and still being able to get another one. But, you know, whatever, losing a relationship might be rock bottom for them, which that looks nothing like rock bottom for somebody else. So it's the discomfort, whether or not we listen to it, and what is it trying to say. And so often I just think that we try to ignore it and avoid it with a lot of devices in the world, and the internet can be one of them for sure. So the review is basically that, you know, acceptance and observation of what is. That's how we recognize our patterns. When we're doing things that we don't like, let's start to journal them. Let's start to bring them down into our consciousness so that we can be like, oh, I did that thing again. Not shame ourselves. It's not about shaming. It's just like, hey, maybe you make a checklist. There's like sometimes I've just, gotten ragey again, check. Feeling cranky again, check. just so I could keep notes on it. You know, for me, tracking things that I want to change, that I want to be different, helps. And especially when we're doing better, like celebrating those little changes, celebrating that, okay, I still rage today, but at least I like caught it. Like at least I acknowledged it and was like, "Whoo, wow, I raged today." Like what was starting it? What was, just start getting curious about it. What is that message that it's trying to tell you? How do you want to, you know, and how do you want to move forward? That's the important part. Once you have your vision of what you want, you know, instead of trying to avoid that block, because that's usually what we do. We have this vision of things that we want, and we're like, "Ooh, that part is hard, so we'll just tiptoe over here and go that way." That happens to me so often that I hope that you will actually take a moment and look at that block and just, what is this block about? Why am I avoiding the block? Let me go through it. And it's usually that feeling of some type that we're trying to avoid. Okay. I think that's all I have. Taking small steps. Small steps, no shame. And just remembering that we're all kind of effed up, you know, we all have flaws. We all have flaws and things that we don't like about ourselves. So just accepting ourselves where we were, which I really loved is what he was saying today too in the reading. So my wrap up is just to tell you that next month we have our free workshop is 3 ways we leave, 3 places we leave our power, I believe. And then, you know, if you're interested in the desire map, let me know. Activating your personal power, which is kind of an offshoot of this, but not really, will actually be the first beta test will be in May. So if you want to do a 2-week run with me on power and how we can get power out of our relationships and all other places, let me know. And I think I said no more than 60 seconds of sales, and that's fast because I do in sales anyway. So I am going to stop the recording, and I am going to take questions from all these beautiful people.